focused on.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Lady K Chat podcast. You are here with your favorite host, Lady K. I welcome you. If this is your first time being here, just know I do not hold my tongue, but I give it with love. Let me tell you something. One thing about me, I would never sugarcoat, and I always want to tell you guys the truth. So if you like that, I'm glad that you are here. But in the whole month of March, I'm going to be focused on gender wars and why they come about and how can we resolve them, because listen, at the end of the day, it's all about you loving your spouse. And in order to get to that place, we have to have conflict resolution skills in place so we can have these successful relationships. But before I dive in, because I'm ready to chop this up, I want everyone to help me give my guest today a great warm welcome. Welcome back, Mr. Carl Serrette. How are you?
Thank you for having me back on here, Lady K. I am doing wonderful. I hope you are doing well too.
I am. Thank you, Carl. It's always great when I have my visitors come back. I love, because I love where we're headed, where we're going, trying to help people understand that, the necessity tools that's required in a relationship. You and I, we both have the experience, both divorcees. And I know sometimes people are like, well, why would I want to listen to someone who's divorced? Because guess what? Just because someone is no longer with that person does not mean they didn't learn a few tricks along the way. And I tell everyone, I speak for myself. I know I was a hot mess in my marriage, and I know some of the stuff that I did, one of the stuff that I brung. But now that as you get older and you get wiser and you start reflecting and you start taking accountability for your actions, you start to see things a little bit different. And I actually wanted to start off with something. I saw this and I thought this was phenomenal. I thought this is pretty much the source of, having a great relationship, one of the components. And it reads, and it says, the main reason why a marriage is successful is that the spouses have learned to put a filter on 3 different areas. It says they filter what they say, which is the mouth, and it filters how they see things, which is the eyes. And it says, and it filters on their heart. And I think that is so true. I know sometimes, life does happen and we get in our way. But when we do step out our way, I believe, definitely these 3 components going to help us have a successful relationship. And in order for that to manifest, I feel like we have to practice these things. So sometimes we know these things, but we really got to put it into practice. What's your say, Carl?
Yeah, I agree. I think, like I said, I was married 20 plus years. So when those things right there were operating, we didn't have issues. But you need both people operating from that perspective. And then if one's not, it can cause, unfortunately, conflict.
Right.
It can cause division within the marriage, and you look at the beginning word of division and the word divorce. That's what you're heading towards with the DIV. So those are things that I don't think people understand. When you start dividing things in your marriage, you're more than likely heading toward divorce, or you've already divorced the person. You just haven't done the paperwork.
Oh, you know what? That's so funny that you say that, right? Because, and I'm just going to throw this out there because everybody always sees, how sometimes you might see a person, it was like, well, such and such, and them just got a divorce. And how is she with another man or he's with another woman? And it's because, like you said, Carl, you're ready to divorce that person before y'all even headed into the court. Like, y'all still in the same house. That person probably don't even know, and you divorced them. You know what I'm trying to say? Because
right.
The silence that go behind that. But we don't want to focus on that area, but that's what can manifest when you don't tuck these things into orders.
Right.
So, but I saw something that I thought that was very provoking, because I saw this person's perspective and I was like, wow, this person doesn't get it, So what I'm talking about, I came across, social media, because, everybody loves social media, right? And it was a post that was saying, it was something, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm trying to find it, but it looks like I can't. But I was paraphrasing, and the lady said, with that quote I just read you, she said, put a filter on my mouth. She said, well, what are we? Are we in the 50s? And my response to her was, let me tell you what my response was to her. Because I want to make sure I read this verbatim so y'all can get this. And I said, you can still be yourself and speak your truth with respect. Example, if you're a cursor and your spouse does not like it when you curse at them, I can say you can still speak your truth without cursing. I say your tone might not be pleasant, but at least you got your point across. But what happened in there? You respected yourself, who you are, and you also respected that person on what they don't like or what they do like.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And that's how you learn how to feel. Like, you gotta have that balance. Like, yeah, it's probably gonna kill you to hold your tongue, but is it really gonna kill you for you to save your relationship?
Well, and I think a lot of people miss out on what you're saying because it's all about me, 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 me. And one of the toughest things to do in a relationship is to stay selfless. Most
Yeah.
people become selfish. Most people, most of us are naturally selfish as individuals. So now you're putting two selfish people together to be selfless to one another, and you got to constantly put your spouse, your partner in front of you, even on the days that you don't want to. But like you said, tone, I listen to, my mom and my grandmothers and, my aunties and them, they always use this thing. And I watch, like I said, I come from a family of 70, 60, my parents married 54 years right now, still going, be 55 this year, long-term marriages. And it was like, okay, well, what are these keys? And the women would always say time, tone, and text or context. And that was the 3 T's. And they said, if there's an issue, pick the right time to have a conversation, because you gotta pick the right time. Be almost like setting the mood. We can set the mood when we want intimacy, but we refuse to set the mood when we want intimacy conversations. So we don't want to take time to do that. And then the tone. What tone are you using? Because if you think about it, especially when you're married, you're becoming one. It's two or one. So if you're yelling at your spouse, you're yelling at yourself. If you're cussing at your spouse, you're cussing at yourself. So why would you put yourself in a predicament that you're tearing yourself down with the tone? Why can't you use the right tone? Because how would you want that tone used back towards you? And then the text, the context, what you're using, what words you're using to go back to. Are you cussing at them? Are you demeaning them? Are you calling them out their name and stuff? And they said those were the things that they use. They said even my grandfather, my dad, and my uncle, they messed up, or my great grandfather, they waited to the right time. They used the right tone and they used the right text to talk to them. And I think a lot of people miss out of that, just having regular conversations. And I'm talking relationship with that. But if we use that on an everyday basis, we would be able to hear one another and what's going on in a lot of the vibe that's causing, it's causing a lot of the gender war that's existing right now.
Right. You said a mouthful on that. And, I have to piggyback and I have to say this. A lot of time when people is sitting down, they're listening to you so they can respond instead of truly just listening. And and excuse me, and listening is not just sitting there, just, putting your ear out. Like you said, Carl, you're actually observing the person's body language, their tone. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can tell, like, oh, look, I can tell right now, her anxiety is on 1,000, but she don't know, but I know. And that's because we have been studying her. You have been watching her. That's part of listening, just knowing, like, okay, I know they're having a hard time. She's the worrier, but let me be the one that come in and bring in comfort and peace. And I think, sometimes they say that opposite attracts. I think in those areas, that's when opposite needs to attract so it can work and it can balance. You understand?
Right.
Like I said, if she's a worrier, she needs to know that she has your support and love, and you're showing her, I got you. That right there, that completes that part right there.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And notice how I said it completes that part. Because a lot of people are like, oh, that person complete me. No. And that's the thing too. Don't go in with that attention, that person looking to complete it, because you need to be completing it. So matter of fact, that's a job for you and the Lord. You feel me? But now when you come into that person, you need to be whole. So when y'all do come together, you act like you said, you act as one. It's
Right.
two people together. Like you said, the more you come together, you're supposed to actually be more selfless. But sometimes I think as years goes on, maybe selfish, but I also understand too, like, there's some underlying reason. Because let's be real, this is real life. You know what I'm saying? This is how you get stretched. This is how you get to know more about the person, know what not to say, know what to say. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to go through some type of trials and tribulations, but also while you're going through it, it's like, how do they fight fair?
Yeah, and that's a key ingredient. How do you do that? One of the things that I would always do, um, I would sit and listen. Again, I mean, if she talked for 2 hours, I'm going to sit and listen. Ironically, as soon as I open my mouth to respond, I get cut off, and then and I go back to listen. But I would always repeat back the key points that she would make, that you're paying attention to what's going on. And I think a lot of people miss that. You know what I'm saying? They miss out on that because they're like, oh, no. But I would repeat back literally verbatim, okay, so what you're saying is this is what you have a problem with me doing or saying or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And then allowing them to respond, then you can respond back from that. And again, that's what you said, when you're listening to learn and be creative and know that you've been paying attention, that's what you do. But if you're listening to respond, you're just waiting for them to shut up, basically, so you can dive in. And then they feel like that's how an argument really escalates, because they feel like, you didn't hear me. You didn't hear what I said. So that's always a big thing I tell people. So, so if you're, again, that's part of conflict resolution. If you're repeating back what your spouse just said or your partner just said, or your boss just said, whatever, you're bringing down, you're diffusing a situation, even if they're upset and angry, because then they're like, okay, I said that. Now you may repeat back what they said, and they may even listen to it and say, no, I don't mean that. Because now they're hearing their own words back to them, and it makes a big difference. But again, that's one of these things I think a lot of people don't think about when you're dealing with certain situations.
Right. I do think sometimes, and it's normal. I think we have a hard time articulating our words. Sometimes we can say stuff, but then over the years, as you get to know your spouse, even though like verbally they may not say it correctly, but you understand what they're saying. But I think that takes time too. Like, oh, I understand what they say, so I'm not going to get offended. I think that's the beautiful thing. And I know that's, however that couple's destination, but some people, it takes so much just for them to get to that place, and others might take sooner because they're actually on a path. And I think I mentioned this the other day. I said another main component too is that how to keep the relationships there is that you got to have a goal in mind. Like, what's the goal? Like right now, where we feel like we have like struggles at, so in order to overcome those struggles, can we maybe put something into place that's going to help us lead there? And I'm just giving out an example. Like, say, like you said, for 3 months, we're date night is every Wednesday from this time to that time, and nobody can interfere. You know what I'm saying? Unless you got business and whatever. But if you put something like that, and then you say within that time we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But when you do stuff like that, again, you're exercising those capabilities. You're exercising the things that you never really exercise, because that's, like I said, people know stuff, they just don't put it into place.
No, they're putting to play what they want to put into play, and that's the unfortunate thing. People make time for what they want to make time for. People invest in what they want to invest. And one thing people don't do, people do not invest in relationships. They do not invest in their marriages. They don't invest in understanding and growing. Most people don't invest in personal growth. So when you look at things, something I shared with you when we were talking, I said, only 15% of the entire planet are self-aware of this, or who they are and their components, everything that goes on. That's only 15%. That is very low. And so now when we're trying to have these narratives and we're trying to defeat the gender wars and we're trying to make these relationships work, a lot of it takes emotional maturity, which most people unfortunately lack. And it's not a being negative or condescending to them. It's just most people are not emotionally mature to handle things, which takes you to another level of using logic. See,
Right.
if we handle every situation with emotions, it's never going to resolve itself. Where we handle a situation with logic, it changes the narrative of stuff. And I think that's something a lot of people miss out on. And they just think, well, I'm just going to say however I want to, and I'm going to do what I want to. I'm going to call her whatever I want to, and then we're going to keep it moving instead of thinking logically how to
Right.
have a conversation and
Right.
do stuff. But we will bend over backwards and speak a certain way at work to our boss, knowing we'll lose our job, or to our homeboys or our homegirls because we don't want to hurt out their so because we can't go to brunch or we can't go golfing. But to our partner and spouse, we'll say whatever we want to say, which is
Right.
backwards.
And I kind of feel like there's a kind of like a loss of respect if you think on that level. I think sometimes too people think, and I'm sorry, it's just the real truth. People think their spouse is like they're in ownership, like that they are their own individual person, sir,
Mm-hmm.
ma'am. You don't own them. So I think maybe sometimes people fall into that concept as well too, like, oh, they
Right.
just want to be there, like they're just there. And it's like, nah, you should be grateful. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, I agree. That's like I said again, it's understanding, and again, it goes back to seeing more healthy relationships. It's going back into having more healthy dialogue. But again, it goes back to that starts at people understanding and being open to wanting to do it. I always say this: you gotta want to do it. You gotta want the peace to exist, and you gotta work at it. Relationships take work, and I always tell people when I hear people say, "Oh, marriage shouldn't be hard work. Relationships shouldn't be hard work." It should, and I'm like, but you're taking two imperfect people to make a union, which is going to be imperfect and going to have issues. Now, I'm not talking about somebody just is straight disrespectful and damaging and abusive, but I'm not talking those lines. I mean, that's still an issue,
Right.
but just normal stuff. And you think sometimes, I want, even for me, when I got divorced, I sat back and I said, because I'm not an arguer. I don't like to argue, and she knew that. Where she was more of an arguer, but being around the women in her family, I see where she picked that trait up.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say, I'm not going to argue, and sometimes I say, hey, I'm going to go for a walk to try to cool things down until things calm down and we can resume this conversation. But I played back after my divorce so many times. I was like, we didn't need to have an argument over that. We didn't need to have a debate over that. This shouldn't have happened. Yes. And you're thinking about things that were petty that really could have been resolved with just a simple, real conversation. And I think some people fear having those conversations sometimes because they don't know how their spouse is going to react. I mean, I'll take it to a whole nother level. I mean, if you're seriously considering going out and cheating on your spouse, have that conversation with your spouse. Do it beforehand, because you get an opportunity to possibly fix whatever the issue is causing you to think that you want to do that. It may not be the fact, some people say, well, it's because of him. I went out and I cheated. He's not spending enough time. But are we having a conversation to resolve that issue? Right. And I think that's a big problem. Like I said, again, a lot of people are just not willing to have tough conversations respectfully and maturely and logically.
It's tough. And sometimes, you never know what the other person's thoughts are going to be. Like, are they going to judge me? And that's the thing too, when you feel like you can't be transparent in your relationship, like, I think that's challenging, and a lot of people have an issue with that, because I think we said this before, Carl, they probably didn't see it growing up, because back in the day, of course, if you really want to think about in our age group, if we think about our parents and our grandparents, like they did things differently. So if you think about it, things got handed down from generation to generation with the concept thinking. It's like, okay, well, where do you kind of break some of that up? And I know some people have a hard time with that. And I think, to be honest, I think one of the places where you should go is the therapy.
Well, again, that's another,
right.
taboo type of thing. A lot of people don't want to do it, or they're trying to diagnose themselves, and that's not even going to work on top of that. But I mean, I can talk about that for 10 hours, being a coach. So, coaching people, and it's just like, but I mean, I look at many of the men I coach now, and they're like, man, I wish I'd have had a coach 20 years ago.
Right.
Man, I would be so much further.
That wasn't really a
No.
thing, like it is now, So
Right.
I get it. And then I also feel too, there was like a lot of more programs geared towards women and moms, but it's like, well, where is it for the men, especially our Black men? But it's like today, I kind of feel like you don't got an excuse like to act the way you have. Like there's so many resources out there. So if you really wanted to change your mind or change your approach and change how you do stuff, you can. I want to go back because you said something about logic, right? And I know most people won't.
Lady K.